Tonight on Newsnight Scotland, is it time for a shake-up in the welfare system? The Prime Minister seems to think so. Is he right to suggest cutting housing benefit for under-25s, or to float the idea of regional rates? And the Governor of California tells us that Scotland should forge ahead with same-sex marriage. Good evening. So will David Cameron succeed where other Tory leaders have failed and managed to reform the welfare system? There is no real substance to the strategy yet, but questions are being asked about how much the state is paying to whom and if they deserve it. Any reform will have a huge effect north of the border. So would people in Scotland get the thin end of this particular wedge? Laura Bicker has been to the east end of Glasgow to find out.
So it's time for a new image, time for the Tories to show who they really are, starting with reforming welfare. David Cameron didn't say how it would be done. Instead, he hit out at those who live their lives on benefits.
You can have a home of your own. The state will support you, whatever decisions you take. You'll always be able to take out, no matter what you put in.
And spelt out how that made the average worker feel.
And it's led to huge resentment amongst those who pay into the system, because they feel that what they're having to work for, others are getting without having to put in the effort.
To see why this matters to Scotland, you only have to look at recent figures. Out of the top 10 areas in the UK where welfare money is spent, 7 of them are here in Scotland and 4 are right here in Glasgow. In Scotland last year, £15 billion was spent on welfare and pensions. In this area alone, Glasgow East, around £160 million is spent on welfare every year. And if David Cameron chooses to mess with housing benefits, 1 in 5 Scottish households could be affected.
There were hints that the Tories would set regional rates for benefits and cut housing benefit for under-25s. Some of the reforms will be unpopular, but it seems many agree something needs to be done.
Why would somebody want to go and get a job when they're just as well off on benefits? Where's the incentive?
They're having holidays and driving better cars than me, and I'm working 5 days a week for buttons. But no, and there is mothers out there that do want to work and want to get back into like fending for themselves, and they can't because the childcare is far too expensive.
First day back at work, I just had my wee baby 3 months ago, so this is me just back off of maternity leave.
So how is it going money-wise?
I found it very hard when I was off, definitely, without the wages and things like that. But hopefully now, me being back at work, I can kind of get some money and get back on my feet again.
Do you claim any benefits?
I was just getting maternity allowance when I was off, that's it.
When you see others who are claiming benefits, not working and claiming lots of money, how does it make you feel?
Oh, very jealous. Very, yeah. Because obviously there's a lot of people that don't have to work and things like that, they seem to do better than what I seem to be doing when I'm out working and things like that. And I pay full everything, full rent, full council tax and things like that. So I find I'm very quite hard off with it.
Successive Tory governments have tried to reform the benefit system, but failed. So is it time to rinse out the old and welcome a whole new welfare system?
Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Jim McCormick from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and from London by Deven Ghelani from the Centre for Social Justice. Well, Deven Ghelani, do you think David Cameron is asking, we'll come on to some of his solutions in a moment, do you think he's asking the right questions here?
I think he is. I think the Prime Minister yesterday opened up a debate that the rest of this country has been having for years now. It's a debate that's been had in workplaces across the country. What kind of welfare system do we want in this country? And people see it as a system that if you've worked hard, if you're in work, then a lot of people see it as unfair, as you could tell in the vox pops that you were playing just earlier.
Yeah, but the problem is they've already announced a whole shed load of welfare reforms. I mean, IDS, who set up your think tank, I think, you know, his universal benefit, for example, not only has it not come into force yet, but there are rumours that it might be delayed. So why introduce a whole further system of reforms on top of that, which might just complicate the original ones?
think you're absolutely right to point out that the universal credit is a major reform, and it's a major reform for the better. And you're absolutely right, the government needs to be held to account on delivering on it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we can't have a debate about other aspects of the welfare system, and a debate that it seems will it's important to open it up now, because it's not a debate that you want to have quickly. I think it's a debate that people do want to talk about, and it's important that we reach the right answers on welfare.
Do you think, Jim McCormick, that the right questions have been asked here?
I think very few people would say the welfare system works well enough, and the system is in many ways broken. It doesn't reward people when they take the risk of taking, for example, low-paid jobs. So the question should be, what kind of reforms do we stand for? It strikes me that talking about housing benefit for under 25s is taking one part of a massive picture, and it's not the most important part. For example, we know that young people, the under 30s, are heading for a very high risk of ending up in the private rented sector in insecure housing with very high rents over the next 10 years. We know there aren't enough good quality jobs in the economy. We know that there's a high risk of in-work poverty. It affects 300,000 Scots. Those are the kind of issues. We have to look at the future of the labour market, not just the benefit system in isolation.
Right. I mean, look, one point that's been made, Deven Ghelani, is the way David Cameron poses this, that this is somehow about people who are out of work versus people who are hard-working getting jobs. For example, only 1 in 8 people receiving housing benefit are apparently out of work. So arguably what we're dealing with, and particularly when it comes to the increase in benefit payments since the start of the financial crash in 2008, that what we're dealing with here is not a problem of the feckless poor who won't take jobs. We're dealing with a problem of the working poor.
Well, I'm not sure about that statistic about only 1 in 8 people claiming housing benefit are in work. I was just reading Full Fact before I came in here, and I think there's a little more to it than that. But I think in terms of the broader point, I don't think this is about pitting one group of people who are in work poverty against another. I think it's about reforming a system, as Jim was saying, that far too often works against the positive decisions that people are trying to make in their lives, and actually want to create a system that works with them. At the same time, there are broader questions to be asked about the future of the housing market and about the labour market, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a debate about what kind of welfare system we want at the same time.
You would presumably accept that, I mean, as we saw in Laura Bicker's film, that people, particularly people who live in areas where there are many people on benefits, feel very, very angry about this, because they're going out to work every day, and perhaps the people next door have never had a job, and their family have never had a job, and they can actually be ending up, as one of the examples David Cameron gave was of 2 families living next door, and the ones who are on benefit, if they claim all the right benefits, can actually end up with more take-home pay than the people who work in.
There are, of course, examples where people can be better off out of work, but that's a case for ensuring we have a vision of good quality work where people can earn more by taking the risk of being in work. An example, if you're in Dublin and you're a lone parent, you can keep 5 times as much of your benefit income, or you can earn 5 times more than you can in this country before you start losing your benefit income. We could have a much more flexible welfare system at little net extra cost to massively increase work incentives, and do something in particular in Scotland about our very high rates of childcare costs. I mean, if we were focusing there, I think we'd have more of a consensus in Scotland and maybe even
but you see,
the rest of the UK.
What other people, I'm sure some of the people in that film would say to you was, oh, yeah, hang on a minute. You know, what annoys us are these people who are just claiming off the state and we're out working, and what you're saying is effectively reform the entire system of employment. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Well, it is a problem that politicians north and south of the border have missed in the decade of growth before the recession. The relentless growth of in-work poverty. That destroys human motivation to keep trying to look for work. And when you're in work, if the risk is you're going to lose it quickly, then we have a structural problem with the labour market that we do have to deal with over the next 10 years.
Okay.
And doing something about scrapping housing benefit for under 25s, it's really a bit of political kite flying, which is understandable for a party leader, but in the long term is concerning because it takes our eye off the ball of the big issues about the future of work as much as the benefit system.
All right, Deven Ghelani, one idea that was floated by people around David Cameron, although it was left out of the speech, was the idea of paying differential benefit rates in different regions of the UK. What's the logic of that, and is that a runner?
Well, I just wanted to jump in very quickly on something Jim said about the labour market. I think there's a separate debate to be had about the labour market, but at the same time, I think this is often about the benefit system as well. We've had, as David Cameron pointed out in his speech, during a period of economic growth, we had a number of people who remained on benefits right throughout that period of economic growth, and it wasn't the labour market, it wasn't the economy that was stopping them from getting into work. It was a range of issues, one of which, a major part of which, was the benefit system.
OK, what about the regionalisation thing?
I think, again, this is a debate that's been opened up in the context of welfare, and I think while we're having these debates, I think regional benefits is a good one to have. I think there are has to be linked to the debate stems around if there are different living costs in different parts of the country, perhaps benefits should reflect that. I think we've got time to have that debate. It's not something that has to be responded to after 2 days after the speech. I think it's something that we all want to go away and think about, unless there are some views that perhaps Jim already has on this direction.
OK, briefly.
I think when you've got, for example, in Greater London, extremely high housing costs, you need to perhaps look at a differential rate of the minimum wage rather than the benefit system. You certainly have to do something about rent controls.
But the argument would be that, if you have one rate of benefits right across the country, in areas with lower wages, then the benefits become a greater disincentive to get work. Well, there's a certain logic to that, isn't there?
Well, we would have to, I think, do some testing out to see, but let's assume Scotland had more powers in the welfare system. I think it's unlikely that you would want to see government in Scotland varying rates of benefits anytime soon, because there are cross-border issues. The more important issue is to look at doing something about the massive tax rate that people moving into work on low pay face consistently. Universal credit in principle should be a helpful step.
Yeah.
In practice, we need to make sure it interacts with council tax benefit, for example, properly, which is being devolved to Scotland.
All right, Luke, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.